Lynne, how are you different at this stage of life?
Oh my gosh. I just think it's the confidence to be who I am, coupled with not caring what people are going to think. So just having the strength to stand on my own 2 feet and not wait for validation from someone else, but really get it from within.
You are a woman of valor.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, it's Hillary, host of Hill Talk's Momentum and Midlife podcast. As an occupational therapist turned entrepreneur at 50, I'm on a mission to connect, motivate, and inspire people over 40, 50, and 60 to know that no matter what, you can reach for that dream and know you're not alone as we create the. And a warm welcome to Lynne Golodner. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Hillary.
Well, we've got so much to talk about, and I try to start slowly, but with you, I'm like, I want to start first with tell me about your biggest pivot in midlife.
Yeah, I feel like my life is a series of pivots, which is interesting. But I'd say that there were two. So one was a little earlier midlife, and it was when I pivoted from journalism to marketing and public relations. I started a company in 2007, 2008 to really make a big career switch. I was becoming a single mom of three very young children. As we all know, the economy was not in a good place then. And I thought, okay, how can I take my communication skills and get people to pay me for it? And so I came up with the whole marketing public relations approach, which was really a journalistic storytelling approach to marketing businesses and nonprofits and things like that. And I really loved it. And it was great. But all the time I kept saying, I'm really a writer. I'm really a writer. And yet, all day long, every day, I was working with these clients, doing quite well. I had a business, I had employees, I had an office and everything. And on the side, I would write articles or poems, or, I had 8 books published between 1996 and 2013. And so this was always on the side, and I never really looked at it as my priority. And as I sort of approached 50, I thought, well, what am I waiting for? And so I really got strategic and said, if I'm calling myself a writer, I really better put my money where my mouth is. And I made a big plan so that I could shrink the business, but keep a few clients so that I'd have bread and butter income and move toward writing as my top priority. I've also always taught writing. And so I really sort of supplemented my writing pivot with teaching some classes so I could just be around writers. And this was about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm happy to say that I am writing as my top priority. I do have clients on the sides, but that's first and foremost what I'm building my life around. And I remember there was a time a year or two ago where I realized I did it. I'm here. And it was like, oh my gosh, like this is what I was planning for, dreaming of. And now I'm sitting in it. And it was just the greatest feeling.
Thing. I mean, I'm totally energized by hearing that because when we talk about pivot, some people are like, but this one's going to slow me down or overwhelm me. And you're very strategic of like, okay, let's keep the bread and butter. Let's downsize this. Let's do this. I think it helps that you're multi-passionate and multi-talented.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It was just deliberate. And I was thinking, if I want to do this, but I still need to support my family in some ways. I mean, I do have a husband who has a very steady job and career that he loves, but we still have, 4 kids and there's a lot of expenses to our life. And so um, I really was very strategic in making that pivot because I wanted to do what I love, but I also realized the need to bring in a certain amount of income. And yeah, it was gradual, but it really only took a year or two to get to that point, and it was just a great reward. It really was.
Wow. Wow. You are like, yeah, that's just really amazing. Well, I like that you can see what the needs are. So you're very practical in the strategy, but you're still totally in touch with that passion with
Mhm.
your voice to share your gifts and your skill set, which it sounds like, I mean, if you've got strategy, that's amazing. And I might just need to work with you.
Let's do it. Sounds great. Yep.
Oh, well, it sounds like you already have kind of shared some of the answer, but I'll ask specifically, what makes midlife the best time of life for people?
It's funny. I remember my dad telling me when I turned 40, which is now 12 years ago, that the 40s are the best decade. And it was great. The 40s were really great. I think the 50s are even better. And I think it's, yeah, seriously, part of it right now is because my kids are grown and I have fewer carpools. I don't have any carpools actually, but like I have fewer obligations that are immediate needs. And so I have more freedom. But you're at a point at midlife, I think, where you know yourself. Hopefully, you've done well enough that you have a little bit of disposable income, and you have that gives you some freedom. But it's the confidence that I think you get by midlife that you didn't have when you were younger. You might have ambition, adventure, big dreams, but there's a lot of insecurities early on in careers and in relationships too. And I just think at midlife, you're like, nobody's going to mess around with me anymore. This is who I am, take it or leave it. And I'm happy with this person. And I'm strong enough to say that. And I think that goes a long way.
Absolutely. I'm proudly 53. I talk about it with people. I'm like, it is an amazing transition. And maybe years ago it used to be that the 40s that people got that, but we're living longer, we're healthier, we're more mindful. And it's like 50. I don't want to say 50 is the new 30 or 40. I'm like, 50 is amazing.
Yeah, I love it.
And
Yeah. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, we're still living. We've got so much ahead of us. I think so many people feel discouraged, and that insecurity that plagued us in our younger years can sometimes kind of strangle people's voices, whether they're writing or wanting to become an entrepreneur, start a whole new thing. And it's like, no, you can do this. Just find somebody to come alongside you to help you along the way.
Absolutely. Well, you also know what you don't know. And so, I've always sought out mentors and coaches. And, I work with people on a regular basis who help guide my success and sort of serve as a sounding board. And I think that there's wisdom in knowing that you do need that support and finding it and not apologizing for it. It's just fantastic. So I think it's the wisdom and also the freedom. I started at 50 to finally just travel where I wanted to go. Like I had this whole bucket list. And so the 50th birthday was a trip to Hawaii, which I had never been to. And it was a week with my husband. And then I brought the kids out for a week. And then I decided I don't want to be a tourist. I want to go somewhere for a month. What would that be like? And so the next year I went to Scotland for a month and I stayed in the Highlands in a house. I actually drove on the wrong side of everything and didn't crash the car, thank goodness. But it was just the best month, just to go somewhere, go to the grocery somewhere else, like really just learn how to be part of another community. And then this past summer, I spent a month in Nova Scotia, and I drove there from Detroit, which is quite far. And I drove there with my husband and one of my daughters, and then they left, and I drove home by myself, which was a huge milestone for me because it was long. It was like 21 hours and I was just alone with myself on the road and I loved it. It just was, there's an independence at midlife that is so great. I wish it had been there all along, but I think you got to work toward it. And that's why you've earned it by the time you get to midlife.
Absolutely. And there's no shortcut to the wisdom and experience and healthy boundaries. We can try to mentor people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I really make a big effort to not sound condescending or that I have all the answers because I don't. But it's the practice that extra grace with yourself now, because you're going to just have to forgive yourself when you can't find that right word or that project that you said you're going to do hasn't gotten done.
Yeah,
All the
yeah,
things.
I agree.
Well, I love your passion for travel. I just took a 10-week sabbatical.
Oh, where'd you go?
I traveled through, I think actually it was 6 countries, and I spent 5 weeks in Norway.
Oh my God.
And there is great value in, I mean, very minimum 1 week in a place, ideally a month,
Yeah.
because I could start giving tours in the little town of Bergen.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and I'm like, oh, great, let's do this. Let's do this. And your confidence comes. And then you're like, wait a minute. If I can travel, not always by myself, but I was mostly by myself for 10 weeks and driving a car, I'm like, I could do anything.
Yes. Yeah. And I also have found that when I travel, I look for the writers wherever I go. So I'm tied into the local writing community, um, just finding, other authors or writers events or, writers group to pop in on and just sort of meet everybody. And it just enriches not only my stay there, but my career as an author. Now I'm connected with writers all over the world. And it's phenomenal. It's really, it opens the world. It opens your mind. It's just a beautiful gift.
Wow. I'm trying to figure out if I want to go back to something or just keep moving forward. Let's talk about the book, one of the books, because you've already released Women of Valor, correct?
Yes, Woman of
Oh,
Valor. Yay.
thank you, Lynne Golodner. And I love that. As a spouse to a retired Marine, we talk a lot about valor and values. Can you give us a little snippet to whet our appetites on the book?
Yeah. So this novel is my first novel, my ninth book to come out. It is a story about a young woman who becomes religious in Judaism. She chooses that path. She's married, has kids, happy with her life, happy in her marriage. And then one of her kids is abused at school, which is devastating. And at the same time, her ex-boyfriend pops back into her life online. And so there's all these challenges. The community doesn't respond the way she expected. And this is her chosen community. And so she really has to face a series of questions. What is she going to do? Where really is her home? And I won't give away any spoilers, but I think that it's a novel about a strong woman choosing an identity that she is proud to live. And I love that aspect of it. When I made this pivot, I made a deliberate decision to craft my author brand around writing stories about compelling Jewish characters. So this story happens to be about a religious community, but not all of my books will be. But there will be Jewish identity in the different novels because that's important to me about who I am, and it's important for my characters. But I wanted to show the religious community in a positive light, even though it's not my community. It was for 10 years, but it's not anymore. And there are plenty of books that are disparaging about more religious ways of life, and I didn't feel I needed to add to that. I wanted to show the beauty, but also the challenges that we face in any community that we're part of. And how do we reconcile that so that we can still continue to see the good and the beauty that we chose? And the title, Woman of Valor, is a double entendre because there is a song in Hebrew, Eshet Chayil, which means woman of valor, that a lot of Jewish men sing to their wives on Friday night. And it describes what, biblically is a righteous Jewish woman, but woman of valor literally is strong woman. And I wanted that to be a part of the story too.
Yeah, absolutely. I love having conversations with people when your values and what's meaningful to you shine through. And it doesn't matter whether we're practicing in that belief system, but shining a positive light and having conversations so that people who either think or believe or were raised differently can just be like, well, look at that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can be proud of this experience and I can change my mind
Yes.
and I can ask big questions.
Yeah. And I will say, it's lovely to hear from readers who are not Jewish that they loved the book and they were able to access it easily. It was just fascinating because it's a world that they don't know. And so that's been really lovely to hear. And when I read novels and I read ferociously, I love reading about cultures I don't know because it's like I've visited that community and now I know more about it. So I think that books can be one way that we really do heal divides and we build bridges to understanding.
To be a bridge builder. Whew, that almost tripped me up. That's all right. Oh my goodness. Well, I I'm just I can't wait to read the book. And I have a book club, so I'll have to recommend it now
Excellent. Thank you.
because we love reading just such a variety, and especially with strong female characters with voices that are kind and not, I mean, you can be angry, but not bitter long term. I think that's kind of the biggest thing that it's okay to have anger, and we can be righteously angry about something that happened to a child, a family member, what's happening in the world, all around us. But how do we communicate that anger and take it into action and strength and moving forward instead of just holding on to it?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important to identify what is important, what our values are, and why, and how we come to that. I mean, that's really the cornerstone. I think a lot of people never do that, and so I love that this main character, Sally, she makes a deliberate decision to alter her beliefs and jump in, full force. And then when she's confronted with, a shade of doubt, how does she reconcile that? And it's a real honest journey of into identity and into conflict and how we weather that, how we meet it.
Absolutely. What stood out to me was deliberate decision.
Yes.
And I would like our listeners or the viewers on YouTube to think about what is your deliberate decision that you're making at any age and stage of life. But once you declare that decision, and see how much that declaration shifts or pivots your direction and the strength and voice. I just said out loud this week, I am going to love living in Colorado. That's my decision. I've been here almost 5 years. I've not loved it. So I'm like, okay, my kids are in college here or will be in grad school at some point. And I'm like, okay, let's make Colorado a positive thing. And just saying it out loud and declaring it, because there's a lot of pressure. People say, oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, it's so this. I'm like, okay, I'm going
Hmm.
to create a different experience, right?
I love that. Yep, it's a choice.
Well, yeah, it is a choice. And so that kind of brings me to the next question. How are you different at this kind of age and stage? I mean, you've talked about wisdom and freedom and bucket list and travel and just doing it.
Yeah.
But was there anything else you kind of wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think I don't care as much anymore what people think of me. I think that was something that preoccupied my thoughts when I was younger, and I now know not everyone's going to love me, and so that's fine. I'm not doing anything to please other people. I'm doing it to please myself and my goals in life, and to make a difference, to make a mark. And so um, I am unapologetically myself, and you know really eager and strong in my voice so that I can share my experiences, my insights, and understand that it's not going to be a fit for everyone, but the people with whom it resonates, those are my people. And really just, it's okay. People don't love me. They're not part of my circle. And that's great.
Absolutely. Letting go of not everybody has to like me or love me or listen to me.
Hmm.
I can let those people go so that I focus and give that precious energy and time to those who I can help or serve or connect with.
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes it quite easy because you can just pare down, you can unfollow, you can disconnect in some way with the people who just don't serve your purpose and your well being. And I don't know why we ever did pay attention to those types of relationships. But at this point in life, I do feel like I know myself well enough and am confident enough in who I am that I don't need to please people who just are not a fit and move on.
Wow, that's really great maturity. How how did you get to that? Because there are probably some listeners who are like, wait, wait, wait. Okay, that's great that you got there, but how?
Yeah. I mean, it took decades for sure. I was very close to my dad, who passed away a few years ago, and he was the epitome of not caring what people thought, and he was always like that. So I just sort of learned from him and modeled after him. I'd often call him with frustrations, and he'd say, "You can't please everyone," And it was this. It was so simple to him, and when I would hear it from his voice, it was like, "Oh, of course." But also, I'm in a second marriage. My first marriage was not a fit, which I knew before the wedding, and I didn't have the courage back then to call it off. And so when I did have the courage to leave that marriage and say I'd rather be alone than be in an unhealthy situation, that was a really pivotal moment for my own confidence. And then when I met my current husband, I was at a really strong point. And so I'm sharing my life with someone who, is a very strong person. He knows his own mind. And we really bring out the best in each other. And so I think it's making those choices to listen and to model after people who really get it that really helped me to get there. So making these conscious choices, I mean, those are two big ones, my husband, my father, but um, even friendships. There are some friendships that I have just let go because they did not serve my best purpose or my best self. And I just did it with peace, like not any resentment or disharmony or even any conversation, just sort of a realization and having the courage to say, I'm going to focus on these relationships. And so the people I surround myself with really do build me up and vice versa. And that's been a very deliberate move on my part.
Now, if it's too personal, just tell me. No.
Yeah.
But did you like verbalize it to the people that I'm no longer pursuing a relationship with you, or did you just kind of let it fade with the intention of not continuing?
I just let it fade because I didn't see any purpose in being hurtful to someone. And so, and the truth is that this might sound very woo woo, but I manifest things very easily. So when I say I just want to surround myself with meaningful people who, have the same goals and values, all of a sudden that happens. So it's not like anybody's badgering me and calling me and saying, we must have plans. There are ways to be diplomatic and diplomatically set people free that don't make them feel hurt or wondering. I also had a friendship that ended and there was never any explanation. And this was a long time friendship. And it was somebody I was very close to. And we would talk for hours and so I even wrote a letter to her saying, I don't understand. And I never heard back. And that really hurt. This was years ago. And I never wanted to cause anybody to feel that way. So I feel like a graceful exit is definitely possible. And often you find that those relationships weren't central to your life anyway, or to theirs. And so it doesn't take that much to just extricate yourself from it too.
I mean, you seem like such a brave, bold, courageous woman of valor yourself. But I think there's especially in leaving a relationship that's not suiting you, I think there's a lot of fear and insecurity. And I heard you say, I'd rather be alone than in an unhealthy situation. But then there's also sometimes the financial piece. There's some of the, health insurance, let's keep it practical. Is there advice you would have for someone who maybe doesn't have the skill set and career path that you have of how to kind of make that final decision?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a while to gather the courage to leave that marriage, and I was nervous financially, and I had supportive parents. What I did was I sort of went through the worst case scenario. Literally, I remember sitting on the steps in my old house and talking out loud. Nobody was home, and just thinking, what is the worst case situation? And so, what's the worst case? Well, I would lose the house, let's say, and I have no clients and no income. So at that point, I mean, I could have moved in with the kids with my parents. And I was in my late 30s and I didn't want that, but I could do that. So I knew I wouldn't be on the street. My children wouldn't be starving. And I could always take a job at a cafe or, a restaurant or whatever, if I needed to, a bookstore. So when I realized that was the worst case scenario and I didn't want it, I did everything I could to work toward not having that happen. And my dad always taught me, you do the work in front of you and there will always be work. Instead of worrying about, what if this client doesn't last, or what if I don't get new clients in the new year, or whatever. And so you just do the best job possible today on the projects you have in front of you. And also I think relationships are really key in this. Like I said earlier, I've always had mentors. I've always learned from other people. And in my career, the way that I've made pivots is by asking questions, trying to learn from someone else, offering to, do the work on the side, not, for a fraction of the cost, just to learn those skills so that I can advance. And I find that when you're eager and you're open, people really respond to that and it does serve you. So I think it's starting with the people also talking through the worst case scenario and seeing if it's as horrible as you imagine, and then making some plans, a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, because once you write those down and you say them out loud, you're a step closer to having them come true. And so I think it's that careful planning and really being honest about what could happen here. It's not always as bad as we think it might be.
Excellent advice and wisdom. I mean, just from, okay, visualize the worst case scenario, say it out loud. Usually homelessness, poverty,
Yes.
harm to children or something are the worst case scenarios, and working towards that best case, the A, the B, and the C.
Yep.
And I love all the wisdom from your dad. I hope that's in one of your books.
Well, let's think about that. I don't know. That's a good idea, but and who knows? Because I'm working on the next novel. It's in revisions now, and then there will be one. I'm trying to do a book a year, so that'll be down the road. But I will say that I have a podcast that I started on my dad's 80th birthday, and in 2018, he was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia when he was 79. And we didn't know if he'd make his 80th. And so I started the podcast to capture his wisdom and his stories. And I interviewed him and I planned the podcast to launch on his 80th birthday. And thankfully, he was with us and we listened to it together. We were all emotional. And then on his 81st birthday, the 1 year anniversary of the podcast, he was my guest again. And sadly, we lost him about 6 months later. But I do have those recordings, which are just golden. So I'm really grateful to have that.
Oh, amazing. I'm so glad you captured some of that wisdom. Oh, my goodness. Well, the only question I was going to circle back to was about how to find that mentor. And it sounds like you are a mentor and kind of a writing coach in that. So, but how would somebody find a mentor to help them through that next kind of stage phase?
Yeah. Well, I think just going where your interests are. So, for example, one of my earliest mentors, her name is Barbara Jones. Actually, I have an episode where I interview her on the podcast early on. And she was an editor at Harper's Magazine when I met her in, I want to say 1998. I went to the Iowa Summer Writers Workshop and I just went to a writer's retreat because I wanted to work on my own writing. And I went to every lecture I could. And she gave a lecture one day about writing essays for magazines. So I went up to her and I said, can I pay you to edit my essays and tell me what I can do better? And she said, sure. She charged me $10 a page, which was so cheap. And she would spend hours red penning everything. And this was back when we had to put them in the mail and send them because there wasn't, the digital sphere like there is now. And she has been a mentor and friend ever since. So we're talking, decades. And so she's a little older than me. So as I had children, her children were older. So she would give me, guidance on parenting, on relationships, on so many things. And now she's actually a literary agent. And so we've talked a lot about, my writing and publishing books and marketing books, but we're friends. But I went up to her and I said, can I pay you to teach me? And I've done that over the years many times when I've found somebody in, a setting or a career path that I'm interested in. And I always offer to compensate them for their time. They usually do it free of charge. And then I just give them gifts of thanks and handwritten notes and, whatever. But you go where your interests are and you ask questions because people love to give advice. And so that's the best way to find a mentor. And I do mentor writers all the time. I coach writers. I actually offer a free monthly write along on the first Saturday of the month. So when people go to my website, they can sign up for it. And it's just to write in community and find like-minded people. If you're dabbling in writing, it's an easy way to just dip your toe in the water too.
Oh, well, I'd like to be your friend and your mentee and learn from you. Well, I know we want people to be able to get in touch with you. And the best way to do that, you said, I think, is your website. Can you give that to us?
Yeah, it's lynnegolodner.com. That's my website. There's lots of stuff there. There's every single way that you can reach me, all the socials and everything. I also have a weekly newsletter that's on Substack. It's lynnegolodnerauthor.substack.com. And it's all about writing and publishing, finding your voice, all of that. So I think those are the two best ways to get in touch. And I would love to hear from anybody who's listening to this episode.
Amazing. And check out the show notes so we get the correct pronunciation and spelling of Lynne Golodner, because you have an E on the end of Lynn and Golodner. We don't want to convert it to Goldner. So check out the show notes.
Yeah.
Well, let me see if I can just capture everything that we've gone through today. Oh my goodness. So your Make Meaning podcast, is that what you started before your dad's 80th birthday?
Yes.
And I love that you're helping bring all of these things that give us this rich, meaningful life into just tangible, almost even tactical advice of how to be strategic and move forward. And whether it's in writing a midlife pivot, I love that you talked about all the pivots you did, journalism and marketing, and making these deliberate decisions to move forward, to have the financial security and stability. But you were also very strategic at saying, all right, let's just get worst case scenario out of there. So I'm not keeping it all in my head and worrying about it. And then creating a path forward. And it sounds like your dad had a huge impact on you. So I'm sorry for his passing. That, when you have such an incredible parent, encourager, mentor, it sounds like he was also a friend.
Yeah. And I don't want to get emotional on the interview here. I have not listened to those podcast episodes since he passed. I know that I will one day, but I can't yet. But his voice is still in my head every day. And that's really helpful. Yeah.
Oh, well, I do love that. And thank you for sharing so much of the wisdom for women of valor, getting the strength. You've got so much that you're offering. And I really do hope that people will either check out the book, order it, and get ready for the next one. Are you doing teasers of what's coming next?
Yeah. So the next one is hopefully going to be out in 2024. I'm really excited about it. And it takes place partially in Scotland, partially in Michigan. There are 4 main characters, so it's ambitious. And there's issues of identity, of course. There's Jewish identity, there's anti-Semitism, there's infidelity, there's LGBTQ issues. But really, it's about living a meaningful life and finding love and really embracing who you are. So it'll be a fun ride.
Yeah, I'm excited. People that listen to the podcast, they don't get to see all my expressive reactions, but check out the YouTube channel so you can see all my excited facial expressions. Well, Lynne Golodner, it has been a pleasure to get to know you, to hear more about all that you've learned and how you're sharing that knowledge with future generations.
Well, thanks for having me, Hillary. I really am so thrilled to be here. What a great conversation.
Thank you. Do you know someone who is over the age of 40 that might enjoy listening to some of these stories or interviews? Please help me by sharing this episode. Ask your friends to subscribe and tell them a little bit about it. The goal is so that people will know that you're not alone. Thanks so much for listening. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you being an essential part of the Women's Midlife Network. We're connecting women. We're sharing stories and inspiring change. And not just for now, but for decades to come. I am so thankful for you, and I always hope you feel the love. Until next time, this is Hillary Baggett with Hill Talks Podcast. Let's move forward in midlife.